Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Haunted House. My name's Ghost, and welcome back to another episode of History with a Ghost. The history of Ireland is bloody. It is a country that has fought viciously for its independence for centuries and has only known peace for the last 20 years. But even then, that peace is fragile. Today, we are talking about the start of that fight. Today, we are talking about the Irish Rebellion of 1798. Ireland around the 1790s down to like the 1500s were kind of connected to Britain. Back then they were their own country called the Kingdom of Ireland, but Britain controlled a lot of what they did, politically and economically. They did this through the Protestant Ascendancy, which was basically the government of Ireland. It consisted of a small percentage of the elite of Ireland who were Protestant. They were primarily based in Dublin and they ruled Ireland with a iron fist, mainly through the use of penal laws. These laws that were put into effect after the Williamite War banned Catholics from buying land, owning a firearm, entering a profession including the army, voting, and practicing their religion freely. By the 1780s, Catholics had grown mad with the laws and started to demand constitutional reform. Of course, around this time, a bunch of revolutions were going on. You had the American Revolution back in the 1770s and the French Revolution not long after. You could say the Revolution of 1798 was mostly inspired by the French Revolution, really. The British government and the Protestant ascendancy were scared to high hell that a revolution could happen in Ireland. To make their worries worse, the whole of Ireland was basically unguarded as most resources of the British military were sent to the American colonies to deal with the revolution. So it was prime time for it to happen. Don't get it wrong, there was still soldiers in Ireland, but not enough to squash a rebellion. Also, with the French Revolution happening not long after, they were worried the new French government would try to send troops to Ireland and try and start a rebellion. So, because of this, the Irish militia was created in 93 with the Militia Act. This in itself would become a worry for the British as the militia would let Catholics join. The Catholics were the average people of Ireland and the people the Protestant ascendancy would oppress. So they were worried that the regular Catholic scum in their mind would rebel from within the militia and use their weaponry. Introducing Theobald Wolfetone. Yes, that is his name. It's so badass. Though that is the only thing badass about him because, well, as you will see in a moment, some of his choices were questionable. Wolfetone was born on the 20th of June 1763 in Dublin. Not much of his early life is known, but he was born to a pretty wealthy family. His father, Peter Tone, was a stagecoach maker, and his mother was the daughter of a famous captain of the West Indies trade. Growing up, Wolfetone would study law at the Trinity College in Dublin and was a tutor for Richard Marden, a member of the Irish Parliament. He allegedly had a affair with Marden's wife, Elizabeth Vesey, where he also allegedly had Marden's first child. That's a whole rabbit hole I'm not going down. He proceeded to go to a bunch of other political schools, earning a scholarship before he went and got a job at a inn. I don't know why you would waste all that talent for a inn, but okay. While working in this inn, he would meet a woman by the name of Matilda. They would quickly get along and get married. Wolfetone was 22 and she was 16. Yeah, I told you he wasn't the smartest. After a while, they had their first child, Yu, and with his job at the time not producing much money and his father going bankrupt, which denied him a inheritance, he had to go looking for another job so he could feed his family. So he finally used his brain and used his skills he learned from the politics schools he went to and started to mingle more with politics. He sent a letter in 1788 to William Pitt, the Prime Minister of the UK at the time, suggesting that they start a colony on the newly discovered Sandwich Island that was found by Captain Cook. That idea never went anywhere, so he tried enlisting in the East India Company but never got in. So, because of that, he kept going with his political career. And my god, did the idiot get well with it. He hated the Irish government. He would write and publish a bunch of pamphlets or newspapers, whatever you want to call them, that would argue for Ireland's independence. And also, he also argued uniting Protestants, Catholics, and dissenters to get rid of the English, and argued to give Catholics rights back. He made a bunch of other newspapers on other issues as well, but we won't go into those. Thousands of his newspapers would be sold, and by 1798, the government of Ireland would start seizing these newspapers and raiding his factories. Backtracking for a second, all the way back to 1778, a group called the Irish Volunteers was formed. They are different from the Irish militia, if you're confused. They had good success while they were around. They basically forced the British government to get rid of the Privy Council, which basically controlled Ireland and the Protestant ascendancy. Like I said in the intro, they controlled a lot of what Ireland did, even though they were their own country. Because of the volunteers' efforts and basically threats to overthrow the government, the Constitution of 1782 was formed, which got rid of the Privy Council and gave Ireland more control. The volunteers would do a bunch of other stuff, including inviting Wolfe to speak in front of them as they had seen his newspapers and liked him and his stuff, and he accepted the invitation. He gave his arguments for why Ireland should leave the British, and they loved it. This success wouldn't last for long, though, as the Irish Volunteers were disbanded not long after, as they would turn into the Society of United Irishmen. We'll get back to them just in a second. In 1790, Theobald Wolfe would head to the Irish House of Commons, where he would meet a man by the name of Thomas Russell. Thomas was a veteran and shared a lot of Mr. Tone's opinions. They would get along very well. Russell was actually the person that introduced Mr. Tone to the volunteers when he was invited to talk. They would stay friends and colleagues, and Russell would become a founding member of the United Irishmen. There was still there was still issues to do with Britain, despite the volunteers' efforts. So, as I just stated before, they were turned into the Society of United Irishmen, and this would officially happen in October when the Dublin United Irishmen were formed, and November when the Belfast United Irishmen were formed. The Dublin Society of United Irishmen were more open and more public, operating in politics. They were also more diverse, with both Catholics and Protestants joining the United Irishmen in Dublin. Meanwhile, the Belfast United Irishmen were more tightly knit and weren't so open doing meetings in private. Um, they were also more middle class compared to the rich folk of Dublin. Uh, so they were mostly and they were mostly Presbyterian. Almost forgot that. My bad. um, Presbyterian was basically just another name for Protestants. They tried to stay peaceful for a while until 1793. Uh, by that time, Mr. Tone and his connections and friends he'd made in the last couple of years at this point thought that there was no other way to get rid of the British than rebellion. And to add to that, by that time, tensions were high. Like, by that time, tensions were extremely high as the French Rebellion had actually started by this time. 3 years, the United Irishmen continued their work until 1794, when a man by the name of William Jackson was arrested and charged with treason for spying on Ireland for France, possibly for an invasion. He wanted to see if the Irish would support a French invasion. He would meet up with Mr. Tone and he would inform Jackson that the Irish would support a French invasion. So Jackson went and sent a letter back to the French, letting them know that, and this is how he would be caught. The idiot sent the letter in the public mail route, and it was seized by the Irish government, and they arrested him. I don't know how he didn't see that coming. Like, like you'd think they'd have more like common sense, but it is the 1700s. Like, they didn't really have critical thinking back then. On top of Jackson being arrested, Mr. Tone was also arrested for a while before he was able to make a deal with the government to be exiled to America. Mr. Tone was sent to America in 1795. The United Irishmen, after Mr. Tone was exiled, were driven out of politics and to hide underground as their plans were exposed. This would be the moment the Society of United Irishmen would also go militant, teaming up with a group called the Defenders, which were a Catholic militant group who had been assassinating Protestant landlords and doing other stuff against the Irish government. They originally hated the United Irishmen, but by this point they were aligned. Mr. Tone would spend a year in America before he headed to France. While in France, he would lobby for the French to invade Ireland and take it over. He would talk to people like Army Officer Lazare Cornot and Army Officer Lazare Hoche, and they would support him. He won their support. He became a honorary French officer. It went great. Him and the French planned to invade Ireland in December of 1796. And well, actually, not an invasion. They call it a expedition, but it was basically a invasion. 14,000 soldiers under the command of Lazare Hoche and Wolfe Tone were gonna be sent off in 44 ships and were gonna land at Bantry Bay and help the United Irishmen drive the British out of Ireland. The reason they chose Bantry Bay was because it was easily defendable and there was a lot of anti-British people who lived there, so they could use them. So yeah, in December the invasion happened. The exact date is not known, and oh boy, did it go horrible. There was a really bad storm on the day of the invasion, and it wiped out half of the ships. Out of 44 ships, 13 were destroyed, and over 1,000 sailors and soldiers were either captured or killed in wreckages. Mr. Tone would go back to France with the surviving ships and lobbied for another invasion, and on top of that, did some work for the French as a officer for a couple years. In the meantime, uh, of all that, after the failed invasion, Britain and the Protestant ascendancy lost their minds. They started to arrest and hang people, tortured a bunch of people for information, burned down buildings they were suspected to be to be used by the United Irishmen and other rebels. They ruled Ireland with an even tighter iron fist, and it would just get worse and worse and worse. People within the United Irishmen became more divided and more secluded, and some were preparing for war. At some point in 1797, they held a meeting with some members leaving the country after the meeting. To add to this tension, two naval mutinies had happened at the port of Spithead and the port of Nore. Thousands of sailors diverted their ships and demanded higher pay. Britain was getting more and more paranoid. They thought the United Irishmen had a hand in this, but it has never been confirmed. Going back to Mr. Tone, as I said before, he'd started lobbying for another French invasion as he got word stuff was getting heated. Um, this time the French weren't that interested as they were involved with a bunch of other conflicts, and the person Mr. Tone was trying to persuade, specifically was the one leading those conflicts, the amazing Napoleon Bonaparte, which annoyed Mr. Tone. Tensions would keep rising and rising until on the 23rd of May 1798, a bunch of United Irishmen leaders were arrested, including Lord Edward Fitzgerald, who was a big organizer in the group. He helped with a lot. He was a massive boy. He died actually not long after he was captured. Arthur O'Connor and another leader and key organizer was arrested, and Russell Thomas, Wolftone's friend and founding member of the United Irishmen, he was also captured, and I believe he was executed if I'm remembering correctly. The day the leaders were arrested was when they planned to start the rebellion. But a couple of days before, the plan was discovered by the British, and they foiled the plan and arrested people, um, a bunch of other people. Um, all the other United Irishmen leaders are now looking around after these arrests, like, oh crap, what do we do? And well, they decided to pull the trigger. In the early morning of the 24th of March 1798, after a carriage was attacked, United Irishmen all around Dublin and Belfast struck, taking over counties armed with only pikes because their firearms had been seized. They would charge British soldiers and most would get cut down. The specific counties the rebellion took place in was County Wexford, County Kildare, County Antrim, County Down, County Mayo, Wicklow, and Arklow. Rebels successfully took towns in County Kildare like Kilcullen for a while before they were driven out and slaughtered by the British. Over 200 surrendering rebels were executed by British soldiers at the Curragh of Kildare, which is a big open field area in County Kildare. This would become known as the Gibbet Rath Massacre. In County Antrim, It was basically the same story. They took the town pretty easily at first, but were quickly squashed by the British when backup arrived and cannons. This would be the trend for most counties I listed before, but there was one county that had a little more success. The most successful place of the rebellion was County Wexford. When news the rebellion had started to spread to Wexford, uh, the United Irishmen there got into action and started to rush and overtake military bases there, and they would do so without much resistance. They managed to steal a bunch of firearms from these bases, which most United Irishmen by this time only had pikes, so they were way more prepared and armed. After some battling with British soldiers, they all gathered on top of Ulat Hill and another hill, which I will not try and say the name of. Or on the 27th of May, the British Army and the Irish militia I mentioned way back in the video arrived. The United Irishmen at the hill, I can't pronounce, were crushed, but the United Irishmen at Ulat Hill actually won, and it's one of the only victories they got. And it wasn't even that impressive. It was the British sent like 110 militiamen to Ulat Hill to defeat the United Irishmen, which they were like 1,000 strong. It was just a bloodbath for them. Another big battle that would happen in Wexford, which is by far the most famous of the 1798 rebellion, is the Battle of Vinegar Hill. Now, I know all of you would probably want me to go in depth with this battle, as it's the most notable one, but this video is massive already, probably. So I'm going to give a kind of brief run over of the events. After all the defeats at battles in and around Wexford, a major British military contingent of 13,000 was getting ready to just take over the entire place. Um, a bunch of United Irishmen commanders gathered a bunch of men at a place called Vinegar Hill, a hill near the town of Enniscorthy. They set up camp there and waited for the British to show up for a pitched battle. The British showed up on the 21st of June and started the battle with a artillery barrage. They would quickly encircle the United Irishmen and defeated them. This camp at Vinegar Hill included women and children, and in the aftermath of the battle, British soldiers would do disgusting things to them. All other risings in all other counties were mostly squashed as well, on top of the ones I just talked about. Meanwhile, while all of that was going on, everything we just talked about, Mr. Tone was still in France trying to get support for another invasion. While there, he would catch where the rebellion had started without them. He was getting desperate and begged the French to give him men, and they agreed to give him a small number for a invasion. Though Mr. Tone would not go with this invasion force, he would stay in France and try and get even more support. On the 22nd of August, 1,100 French troops landed in County Mayo. They quickly captured the town of Killala with small resistance from British soldiers. They would quickly set up base in the town. They would 2 days later take the town of Ballina. Word started to spread that the French invaded and a bunch of United Irishmen would head to the town to team up with them. Not long after, on the 26th of August, a combined total of 2,000 United Irishmen and French soldiers would make their way to the town of Castlebar, leaving 200 troops behind them in Killala to protect their rear. The troops in Castlebar thought that the French and the Irish would attack straight on into the town. They had all their troops and cannons ready, but the leader of the French and Irish contingent, Jean Humbert, was made aware of a different route that they could use to surprise the British troops. It was a wooded thick path near Lake Lough Connon. The British thought it was impossible to go through there, so I can only imagine their shock when they appeared behind them. On the way to Castlebar, they ran into an outpost, which was most likely a early warning system for Castlebar. Um, that outpost was quickly destroyed by the British, by the French, sorry, being burned down. Not long after, they would charge Castlebar and decimate the force there. It was a little rocky at the start. The French and Irishmen were getting destroyed by the cannons, but they quickly got rid of them. It's apparently said that the French and Irish fought so viciously that some British soldiers got scared and decided to switch sides and join the French and Irishmen in attacking their comrades. Militiamen would join it as well. They would proclaim not long after the Republic of Connaught at Castlebar, but they were defeated like the rest on the 5th of September, retreating from their base and the British retaking Castlebar. 3 days later, Humbert and his men would surrender at the Battle of Ballina Muck. Mr. Tone had finally gotten support for more troops by this point, and a month after Humbert's capture, Theobald Wolfetone showed up to Ireland with 8 French ships with 3,000 soldiers, but they were intercepted by 10 British ships. This would become known as the Battle of Tory Island. This would be the Society of United Irishmen's last hurrah, led by Jean Humbert and Theobald Wolfetone. The British were on the lookout for another naval invasion and had ships patrolling Ireland and French naval bases. Bompard thought he could just slip past the ships in the middle of the night, but he was still spotted by a British naval ship, which would chase Bompart's ship and the rest of the fleet for days before they finally lost them in a storm. The plan was to land the 3,000 troops in Lough Swilly, which was a sea inlet in County Donegal. When he arrived off the coast, he tried to look for a proper landing spot in the inlet, but couldn't find one, so they parked their ships off the coast and waited till the next day. In the early hours of the next day, Bompard would be surprised when he saw multiple British ships were heading their way. They tried to escape the British, but were unable to slip by, so they started a line battle. All British ships immediately fired upon the main ship of the line, the Hoche, which Bompard was the captain of. The ship was quickly destroyed, and Bompard and Theobald Wolfetone would surrender shortly after, with 200 of their sailors dead. Not long after, 2 more of their ships were destroyed, and the rest destroyed the next day after a long pursuit. After Bompard and Mr. Tone were captured, Bompard was released, but Mr. Tone was sent to Dublin, where he was trialed and found of treason. He was to be hanged on the 20th of November. He asked to be executed by firing squad, but was denied the request. A day before the execution, Theobald Wolfetone would unalive himself by stabbing himself in the throat. He died a couple days later, pretty much ending the rebellion. Wolftone's grave is in the Bowden's Town Cemetery in Sallins in County Kildare. There was still United Irishmen fighting using more guerrilla tactics, but they were ultimately squashed as well. Because of the 1798 rebellion, in 1801, Britain abolished the Protestant ascendancy and took full and proper control of Ireland, making future fights for freedom way harder. And that's about everything about the 1798 Irish Rebellion. This is by far the longest video I've done. I thought the Red Baron video was long, but this was another level. Um, but yeah, I hope you liked it. It was extremely tiring, but also extremely fun doing research and making this video. But yeah, um, if you like this video, please give it a like and a follow, and I'll see you next time. Bye.